Hi students, well you made it to week 7 and you're almost done, but we have a very large assignment this week and I want to go over it with you. So this week we have the Focus Scholarly Review of Nursing Research. So let's start by looking at the written assignment instructions. So I'm not going to spend much time going through the overview, but something I want to point out is that this paper may serve as the foundational work for your capstone project, which comes at the end of the BU coursework, and it will also help you as you go forward in your next courses. So that's kind of important to remember because you're now beginning to build on concepts that you're going to use to complete your capstone project. So let's look a little bit at the process. So you'll notice after a process it says with the assistance from the search librarian. So you may need to reach out to a librarian to assist you with your literature search for this assignment, but you'll also notice that I posted a video about how to do a library search, and that may be helpful as well. So you already have an identified PICO question, and you're going to use that PICO question to guide you so that you can retrieve as many published studies as you can find on your phenomenon of interest. But what's most important is that you're going to use a minimum of 2 search engines. So maybe you use CINAHL and ProQuest, or Medline and Oval, or Google Scholar. But keep in mind that you're going to use 2 of these, not just 1. The other thing is important is that we're looking for actual research that's been published. So I know some of you struggled finding that initial research article that you critiqued. So keep in mind what you needed to look for when you're looking for research. And that can be quantitative or qualitative, but it does have to be actual research. What we don't want is editorials or quality improvement articles. So if you need to go back to that unit or week and reread how to find a research article, please be sure to do that. The other important thing is to keep track of how you found your articles, what keywords you used, and what search engines, because this is going to be part of your paper. And the other thing to keep in mind is that although no minimum and maximum number of articles are specified, we do require that you have at least 4 nursing research studies included. And if you don't have at least 4, I can't accept your paper. Once you find these 4 articles, or minimum of 4, you may have more than 4, then you want to do a close read of each article. And as you're doing this close read, you are critiquing it. So we practiced our critiquing skills earlier in this course, and you're going to use them again. And because you're going to be synthesizing your literature, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more, it's important that you take notes about similarities and differences with each study. You're going to analyze the adequacy of the study and determine its strength. Is it valid? Is it reliable? If it's qualitative, is it trustworthy? Does it demonstrate the same results or different results from other studies? What do you really know about your topic of interest after you read these articles? Once again, you're going to be doing an evidence table, and this time you're going to include all of your articles. So you got to make a determination of the level of evidence for each study that you include, and you need to organize these on this evidence table in alphabetical order by first author. So build your reference list for the paper and then start plugging in that evidence table. So you'll notice highlighted here is that you're doing this literature review as a synthesis. So what does that mean? What it means is that you're not going to write about article number 1 and then write about article number 2 and then write about article number 3. You're actually weaving the data you've discovered from your review of the literature into a synthesis. What are the similarities? What are the differences? Are there flaws in all of the studies or one of the studies? Overall, what do the studies tell us about your topic? What information might be lacking? Is your topic one that has been studied by interprofessional teams or maybe just by nurses? Draw conclusions about the overall strength of that body of literature you found. What gaps do you see? Is there enough evidence to warrant a change in practice? Remember to answer that "so what" question for yourself so you can communicate this in your paper. Once again, you'll notice down here that we have included an example paper, a grading rubric, and a focused scholarly review paper outline. This assignment is worth 100 points, and it's due Sunday at the end of week 7 by 11 p.m. So let's take some time and look at the rubric. So I do use this rubric to grade your paper. You'll notice that the first thing on here is your evidence table, that it's accurately done and that you've accurately identified your levels of evidence, and it's worth 20 points. Now remember that there's more than one level of evidence pyramid, so you have to identify for me which one you're using. So are you using Johns Hopkins or are you using AACN? You're going to talk about the significance of the PICO question that you have. You're going to talk about that search criteria, and it needs to be specified and complete. Then you're going to notice that the next big area that has a lot of points is that synthesis of the research. And you'll notice here in bold, the student's own voice and critique appraisal of the studies appear throughout the paper. So I'm going to go through the sample paper and show you what we mean by this. Also, you're going to need to include strengths and limitations, gaps, that the research chosen is timely for the topic. But your next big area of points is down here, and it says recommendations include a theoretical framework, key stakeholders, members of the interdisciplinary team, organizational resources required, and at least one measurable outcome criteria. So make sure that in your paper you are using these words so that I can find where you're addressing them. State the theoretical framework, the key stakeholders, the members of the interdisciplinary team, the organizational resources that are required. And then you can even say the one measurable outcome criteria is, and then write that outcome criteria. As always, you'll be graded on the organization of your paper and format, including grammar, punctuation, spelling, APA. So now let's take a look at sample paper. So here's the sample paper, and I've highlighted some areas for us to discuss. This is your title page. It shows you how the title page should be formatted. We come down to your second page. Again, you've got your running head, retyping your title, and you're now going to talk about the significance of your topic. Why is it important? But the thing I want to point out is at the end of this introduction, where you're talking about the significance, is the purpose. And this is your thesis statement. So it's important that this be included. The purpose of this paper is to synthesize current research that answers the question, and then you write out that PICO question. If I don't know your PICO question, I'm not going to understand whether you've answered the question or not. So be sure to include that thesis statement. The next part of this paper is your search criteria, and we talked about that. Remember, you're going to use 2 databases. So in this example, they talk about CINAHL Plus. That's the database they used. They used these headings when they were searching for articles: music therapy and preoperative period or preoperative care. Then they limited that search to English language only, and the articles had to be from 2008 or later. And when they put those major headings in and those limitations, they got 23 results. They then reviewed the abstract and they chose 4 final articles. Now remember that you're going to write this up twice because you have to use two databases, but it's going to look very similar to this. And what I would expect is one paragraph on one database and another paragraph on the second database. So let's look at this review of the literature, which is going to be the major part of this paper. And the first thing I highlighted is that sometimes you have two studies cited at one time. So this statement that was made by this writer found this information in two of the articles. That's showing me that there is some synthesis. Let's go down a little bit more. And this writer states that across all studies, post-test anxiety levels were completed using the same methods as pre-test. So what that's saying is that out of the studies that I looked at, all of them did this, again showing synthesis of that literature. Here's another statement. Regardless of the methods of data collection or tools used to assess preoperative anxiety, all studies found patients who listen to music in preoperative period have a greater reduction in anxiety compared to patients who did not listen. So again, synthesizing what they've seen or read. The next sentence states that Thompson, which is one of the studies, and Lee, which is the other, found the VAS anxiety scores of these patients who listened to music were significantly decreased. So in these two studies, they measured anxiety with a visual analog scale, and then they give me a statistical reading here showing that there was significance in these two studies. Here's another example of synthesis, showing that in these two studies, Knee and Arson, they both reported statistically significant decreases, and they gave me the p-values respectively. So I am going to expect to see some statistical results if you're using quantitative articles. When we get down to strength and limitations, you'll see that they say the overall strength, that's the first sentence. Now I know this paragraph is going to talk about strengths. The recurring limitations. This paragraph is going to talk about limitations. So use those words found in that rubric so that I know you are addressing those areas. This writer did a robust section on gaps. You can see that it's a very nice full paragraph here. When we get down to the recommendations section, you're going to make a decision. Would you recommend a practice change or not based on the literature that you review? Whether you do or not, you still need to address those things that we found in the rubric. So I want to give you a good an example of how they did it here. Here's the theoretical model that they're going to use, the Iowa model of evidence-based practice to promote quality care. Is going to be used to guide the implementation. So clearly identifying this, we come down and there's that key word, key stakeholders. So this writer has identified those key stakeholders. And here is that clinical outcome. The team could consider the change successful if VAS or STAI post scores were significantly decreased in a majority of patients after 30 minutes of music listening. See how that is very measurable? And your paper will end off with a conclusion and, of course, your reference page typed in APA format. So here's that outline that we've provided to help you. You'll see that you've got your introduction. It talks to you about how it should be written, the search criteria and how it should be written, the review of the literature. Notice that it's going to be about 3 to 4 pages long. Strength and limitations, gaps, and then recommendations. Again, I'm encouraging you to use the key words that you see, including theoretical framework, key stakeholders, organizational resources. When you use these words, I know that you're addressing that. Then you have your conclusion. Well, I know this is a long video, but I hope it helps you as you move forward with your week 7 written assignment.